Well, I first want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has contributed to this space coming together. My name is Jessica Zartler, and I've worked in this space for quite a while, a lot in the background, doing a lot of interstitial community support and nurturing work, along along with very tangible projects across education, research, and tokenomics and governance in founding the first digital commons, the Token Engineering Commons. And I was with, actually, Leon and Xavier in the park. I remember a few years ago hearing them sharing their visions around what could a commons look like in Brussels and how might we have this local connections between the local and the global. And I think it's a beautiful expression here. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. We are going to be holding, as Corey mentioned, we're going to have some listening in a presentation and then also a community fishbowl. You may or may not know about Regen Network. They are a fantastic project who's been working since 2017. They're a blockchain project focused on ecological state and representation. They have a blockchain on Cosmos Network, and they have been wanting to potentially move multi-chain. They work with on-the-ground communities to co-develop DMRV, digital verification methodologies to issue eco-credits to finance tangible, actual on-the-ground work. And they're doing a ton of amazing connecting in the space. They launched a token called the Regen token on Cosmos. And recently, you may have also seen, especially on this hub, this little happy mushroom. There is another project who is uniting around this meme for regen.tips, and they're a culture token. And they're very keen to connect degens to regens. And Regen Network is bridging between the ground and the virtual space. So we have these two connectors, both rallying around this meme. They both are planning to have the Regen token ticker. So there's been some tension. I'm just going to be very direct in saying that. And I think we wanted to bring that into the community because this is a collective. And memes are summoning cards. I'm a big memancer. I've been called at Block Science, my colleague called me the general memancer there. They're a summoner, right? We are uniting around these flags. But as somebody said the other day, flags can also cause separation. So I love that your original meme of Regens Unite that you actually didn't even put on the poster because you're so commons oriented. But here our goal, you forgot. So I think it's a beautiful theme for today's discussion of Regens Unite, and particularly around memetic commons. Memes also direct attention. They direct value, and there can be memetic appropriation. I have an article in draft about memetic gentrification, if anyone wants to collaborate on that, but they can be appropriated. So maybe people building for a long time, how do we flow value and attention in these memetic commons? And do we as a community want to have some sort of a body, institutional body, to govern that commons? What is regenerative behavior that we want to be rewarded? These are very open questions that we really need to source the collective intelligence. So I'm going to pass it on to Greg for a presentation, and then Jesse Kate, who's with us virtually, and then we'll introduce a fishbowl and would love to hear all of your voices on this topic and let you know how this conversation is moving forward in tangible action and how we might support that as a community. So we're going to just switch on Greg here. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, bro. Hey, Greg.
I am going to, can people see the screen share here?
Yeah, get up. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, first, shout out to the Regens Unite team and the Commons Hub there in Brussels. Jessica for hustling and so many other of you. Thank you so much. I wish I was there. I was a little under the weather when the time came to make the final call about coming. So I'm grateful to just be able to zoom in and not spend the carbon and keep being with my family and have at least a brief moment of community with all of you. So I'm super grateful for that. Cool. Well, this is going to be a quick presentation on this idea of the Regen Commons, which has been slowly getting worked on actually for a while. Many of you may have gotten DMs or texts, and I remember chatting with the Regions Unite team and Giveth and Gitcoin and RefiDAO about this idea actually more than a year ago, about this idea that sort of seeds with the fact that Regen Network Development, which is a public benefit corp in the United States, which has been working on this movement and sort of our take on it for quite some time, owns a trademark related to the use of the word regen, and we would really like that to be held in common. And so we had started the process with people about what that looked like. So this is a continuation of that conversation, really. So I'm going to give a quick overview of why in a way, and then I'm going to pause and I'm going to hand it over to my friend and colleague Jessie Kate, who's going to talk a little bit about how she's been leading research around kind of the legal architecture that we might imagine creating an exclosure around the trademark of Regen that actually becomes a shelling point for coordination, integration, and commenting. So that's going to be our part of this. We're going to try to do it super quickly so that we have plenty of time for dialogue, conversation, and then just engagement around this general ideas. So let's see here. So the tragedy of the commons is that there isn't one. I always laugh because, and you're all commoners, so you understand this, but that original description by Garrett Hardin is sort of an example of use of resources in which there was no commons. But we'll get into why commenting. I'm not going to get too deeply, except for maybe towards the end, into like Eleanor Ostrom and other things. I'm assuming some amount of basic information. So why comment? Well, depletion everywhere. I think when we don't create rules that help coordinate amongst the community, oftentimes we end up either through intention or just because that's how it is in depleting shared common pool resources. This is just kind of like the classic overview, right? You have a specific, and this is in the case of land. And I guess what I'm inviting everyone to do is imagine, and Jessica already sort of brilliantly engaged with this around a memetic commons. Is that the right analogy? Is it not? I happen to believe that actually the digital sphere and the meme sphere could actually be a situation in which we could increase the size of the commons through collaboration. So it isn't strictly just like regulating the number of cows on a pasture, that classic example. But I do think it requires some coordination and self-regulation, right? In order to not be decreasing the sort of like the value of a coordination system, of a linguistic system of meaning, a system of generating meaning. Here we get to this sort of like classic dichotomy where on the right side, you have this idea of like, I made this. Classic. It's just classic. People are always like, oh, cool. This is a meme. It's my meme now. This is an idea. It's my idea now. And then on the other side, you have like, grumpy shouting, that was my idea first. And we have this dichotomy, one way or the other. But do we have to actually live in a world where it's either enclosure or theft, right, to manage these common resources? Is that the world that we need to live in? This is a disclaimer. I don't actually agree with each of these quadrants, but I thought it was kind of interesting to note that there's different ways. I just pulled this quickly off of the internet. There's different ways to think about how to solve these issues, right, depending on our values and our ideas. What are the ways that we want? Do we want to live in a world in which we're sort of overgrazing our meme space, our brand space? And let me just tell a quick story. It's like, so Regen Network, and obviously this presentation isn't at all really about Regen Network, but we work with indigenous people, we work with governments, we do really concrete, pretty transformative work using open source technology at the base of that. And we're always concerned that we may get into a situation in a few years where we are having continued success and traction, which exists, and then all of a sudden people start to flee Regen because of misuse of the word or term or ticker symbol of Regen, right? What happens in that case? There could be real damage to real people really doing amazing transformative work on the ground. So how do we coordinate to uplift? How do we not just, be like, hey, get off the lawn, but how do we actually harmonize, coordinate, and cooperate to uplift the movement through governance? So, Regen as an enclosure, well, we're not really thinking very hard, right? Regen as cooperation, cool, but the devil's in the details, right? Regen as a movement, amazing. Regen as exclosure. So the rest of this presentation is going to be getting into the concept of creating an exclosure in which we're actually not enclosing Regen brand and need, but exclosing it such that there are concrete rules to support harmonization, coordination, and win-win results as we come together to create this regenerative movement together. So just a quick reminder, of course, I've been using the word commons, and I'm sure many of you are using it a lot there at the Commons Hub, but what are the principles of commoning as per Elinor Ostrom, amazing Nobel-winning economist and social scientist? Number one, define clear group boundaries. Number two, match rules governing of the use of the common goods to the local needs and conditions. Ensure that those affected by the rules can participate in modifying the rules, and that's a big part of what we're offering and inviting, is like, how do we create a structure where we're defining fair use of Regen in different ways together, so that it isn't sort of free use and it's just a free-for-all, or like one group dictating to everyone else. You are all aware of these. I'm going to keep moving just because I want to just honor everybody's time, and I know that there's a huge amount of wisdom and excitement latent in the room. The end goal here is to achieve a system in which we might actually have two Regen tickers, but that they're unified in and coordinated, and there isn't a sort of like threat of degradation, of a mutual degradation taking place. And so again, that's kind of the intention here. So with that, I'm going to sort of introduce my friend and colleague, Jessie Kate Schlinger, who has been supporting us to think about this, along with a bunch of amazing folks at MetaGov and beyond, and her friends at the Mill Law Center, to think about the specifics of how to Regen comment. What might it look like to use existing legal frameworks and architectures in a completely novel way, to exclose instead of enclose, and create a commons instead of a private, sort of like a privatization approach to generating coordination. I'm going to stop sharing here. Jessie Kate, over to you. And I'm happy to, I think you probably have screen sharing if you want to screen share anything. And I'm also happy to pick anything up if you want. So,
yeah, hi everyone. It's cool to jump in on this event, and I've been having a lot of fun working on this idea. I love the waves. That's so great. It's usually so alienating to be to feel like a remote head in a presentation. Gregory invited me to talk a little bit about the legal design thinking that we've been putting into the Regen Commons. I got involved with it because I think it's such an interesting legal design opportunity, I guess. Like the question of how to take something like a trademark and manage it in a way that is accountable to a multi-stakeholder group, but also sort of secures the trademark in a structure that sort of guarantees it's dedicated to a purpose is like kind of harder than it feels like it should be. And so when Gregory and I started talking about it, I was looking at, like the community's brainstorms and discussions about what do we want to do with the trademark and how do we want to manage it. And I think the really natural place to start off looking was thinking about a trust, because the trust is like, oh, you're holding something in trust for usually for people. Usually it's for beneficiaries of some kind. And so, although a trust is intuitive, it actually the traditional form of trust doesn't work for this, because the trademark wouldn't necessarily be being held for individuals as beneficiaries, but really for a purpose. And then there happens to be people who care about that trademark and users of that trademark, but that felt like an important distinction. So beneficiary would be like if the trademark was like spewing off money, and that money was being given to the users of the trademark, but that's not how we're thinking about it in this case. And so we started to think about, okay, well, what might other approaches to this be? Many people have heard about my frozen. Interesting. Let me. Let me just try this again. Okay, great. So many people in this community might be familiar with the idea of a purpose trust. Purpose trusts are lesser used, but they're a specific kind of trust where the legal accountability of the trust is to the purpose statement of the trust itself. And they're not particularly charitable entities, but what's nice is that it maintains this idea of like there aren't private owners of the trademark, which I think that Gregory and the Regen community have been trying to get around. But purpose trusts they're not really designed for multi-stakeholder governance. And so we're just sort of like playing around with, okay, we've got, the purpose thing, maybe the trust could hold the trademark, but we still want to be able to have accountability to a community, and that sort of like flow back from the stewardship of the trust of the trademark to the community itself. And so we were looking at other forms. We looked at kind of like nonprofit forms that don't have any private owners, but could be managed with a membership structure. So like a cooperative or an unincorporated association. Anyway, as we were looking into this, the DUNA, the Decentralized Unincorporated Nonprofit Association, has been making the rounds online because it just came into effect in, thanks Gregory, just came into effect in Wyoming last Monday, I think it was, on July 1st. And Gregory's putting up a spreadsheet that you probably can't read, but it's a comparison that we did to look at a few different types of entities. And what was really neat and stood out about the DUNA is that it's a very lightweight structure that is crypto native, and the community that we already have within the Regen community is crypto native. It allows for and explicitly supports the ability to govern the community through distributed ledger technology and through smart contracts. And so it just sort of feels like personality-wise, the DUNA structure matches that kind of governance that has been getting talked about. And so what we're looking at doing at this point is starting off with a DUNA, sort of building up those mechanics. The kind of interesting thing about a DUNA as well is that it requires a minimum of 100 members. And so you can almost see that as being like a threshold for the wider community to say like, yes, we're in, we want to do this sort of like collective stewardship of this trademark. And the complement to the DUNA might be that we establish a trust to actually hold the trademark itself, but then the trust would have trustees. The purpose of the trust would be to steward the Regen trademark for all the Regen purposes that are to be decided by the community, and the DUNA can actually elect the trustees of the purpose trust in a way that creates that follow-through accountability back to the community, but keeps the trademark itself sort of like protected in this little bubble. So that's kind of what we're thinking about. Back to what Gregory was saying about innovative legal structures, and I think there's always a delicate trade-off between innovating in legal structures for the sake of being innovative and getting something that works and that has sort of like confidence around it, and purpose trusts are sort of like fairly well understood at this point, even if they're less common. The DUNA is totally innovatively structured, but I do think it's aligned with the broader interests of the community to push forward legal kind of like viability for DAOs. And so in that sense, there's also a nice kind of broader community alignment in terms of contributing to the advancement of that as well. So really curious to hear what people think. I know a lot of people have been thinking about DUNAs, and it would be really cool to hear like questions, critiques, concerns, etc. Yeah, I'll bring it back.
Thank you, Kate. And I think I'll actually at this stage probably hand it over to Jessica and Tony to kind of start moving into the rest of our time together, which I think is we've done some talking and framing of the states and the opportunity, a little bit of the problems, some of the why and the how, and yeah, just really excited to hear how this is landing, and kind of just witness and participate in a more communal conversation.
Thanks, Gregory. Thanks, Jessica. One thing I did just want to offer as a definition, because I don't think it was touched on, but exclosure. It's a word that is a neologism. It's made up, essentially, by Jessie Kate and myself and someone called Primavera. And it's part of this dynamic around exstitutional theory, which, again, is another made-up word. There's a lot of made-up things, and I guess that's part of our community, right? Is that we get to make things up. And I think part of trademark and intellectual property law is around an existing set of rules that maybe we didn't have that much say in setting up. And so there are certain private property ownership, extractive, that's mine, dynamics in the default legal systems. And the idea with an exclosure is that it creates a boundary so that you can have an alternative logic within your boundary. And so, for example, commons logic instead of private property logic. And that's the reverse, in a sense, of the enclosure movement, which was when various large institutions and states chose to put a boundary around what used to be common property and said, no, now this is private property. So we're trying to reverse that. We're reversing enclosure, and that's the exclosure coming from the inside out. So I thought it might be useful just to give a little lowdown on that concept, because it's at the core of really, I think, what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create an alternative logic for what in the private law world could be just sort of, get off my land, get off my turf, as Gregory was so beautifully saying. But I mean, that's not how we want to operate. We want to find a different alternative logic. We want to find a coordinated logic. And it's interesting as a gesture of good faith. I find it sort of maybe I should express my slight partiality for the Regen Network folks. So I should introduce myself as well. Sorry, I'm Tony. I like to play the violin, and I run a blockchain group at Stanford Law School, and we founded a blockchain law journal, stuff like that. But I really care about the commons most, and fundamentally how we resonate together, how we attune to each other, how we find these logics that aren't about the structures and the stories that were told to us, but the stories that we get to make up together. And so, So
I'm hoping and guessing most people in this room are familiar with Fishbowl. I'm even wondering, should we break the Fishbowl format of like doing it in a row? Should we like just pass the mic around the room kind of thing? But generally, you have 4 chairs. We're going to have 3 people that want to jump up and get in on this. Feel free to start walking toward the chairs. We want to fill 3 chairs. We're going to leave 1 open. And the thing is, when somebody in the audience feels, I must speak, they can come and fill the empty chair. And then the other 3 on the panel notice and try to make their way back to the audience. I will say also, we would love to kind of harmonize, optimize for hearing many voices. So trying to keep, short and sweet and mimi. So yeah, I see Gustavo appeared as we could use 2 more people to join. And a few provocations while we wait for these chairs to get filled. One is, what is the highest form of collaboration that we might envision between Regen Network Token 1 and Regen.tips Regen Token number 2? Another potential provocation, what does regenerative behavior look like that we would like to see financed or rewarded from this mimetic value flows? And I welcome also any other provocations. If you want to even just jump up into the chair and ask a question to everyone as well, we don't have to have the answers. We can also pose questions. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Gustavo for being brave as jumping up. And I'll pass the other one to Monty and have fun.
Thank you. Yes, actually, my intervention is more a question to the last presenter. I don't know, Xavi, if we have the opportunity to plug them back in. Because I saw the split shade there among Duna's, Purpose Trust, and other. And I'm curious if you guys actually dig into the possibility of establishing a church as a legal mechanism to build these Regen Commons, because actually it's super in the scope of a church. A church, what it does is they build culture, right? That's what a cult is, an organization willing to build a whole new culture. Bitcoin is a cult. Ethereum is a cult. Regen is, of course, a cult. So following also the indication of being a little bit provocative, why we just don't simply acknowledge that what we are trying to build here is actually a new cult. In the Regen space, it happens that this cult is actually oriented to save the world and to have some clean air there to breathe. So yeah, it's a question or an invitation to add also the church legal structure, because it makes sense. It's actually with maybe not that much with Regen networks, because you guys are actually doing real shit by connecting the off-chain world with the on-chain one. But yeah, now if there is this proposal to join efforts with a cultural coin like Regen, hey, let's explore a little bit further and I don't know, let's go in that space. I'm just a church and cult fan, so.
Wow, I did not expect that to be. Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea.
It was sort of a question.
Oh yeah, please.
But I'm total. I mean, Jessica, you should chat if you want. Also, we can just let it go. I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah,
I mean, that's not too.
My brief comment is that.
Just one second. So, can you speak? That's open? There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, a church is more like this than a structure, and so as I think what's kind of neat is that once we figure out the structure that we want, within that there's a lot of different options for getting invention if that is desired, and yeah, I don't need to go into that. I'm curious to get a little bit better from that.
I don't know. I think it carries a little bit of baggage, the concept of cult and church.
Just add it to that spreadsheet.
Yeah, from my perspective as one of the kind of source stewards behind ReFi DAO, leading the kind of propagation of the ReFi meme, I think it's certainly, this kind of discussion is certainly something that we've been thinking about over the years as well, seeing more and more ReFi projects come into the space, and some amazing projects and some projects that are just not really ReFi, but are coming under that banner, at best sustainable DeFi, if not just pure DeFi or worse. And how does that impact the reputation in the space of, the ReFi movement, etc.? It can have damaging impacts for everyone else or the whole movement as a whole. So I understand that kind of tension. And at the same time, also RefiDAO is big on local nodes. And, we have a very decentralized approach to that at the moment. We have, our branding and the kind of name format of that. Anyone can just go start a Refi local node. But at a certain point, if there's a Refi node that's using our brand reputation and our kind of thing, and then doing stuff that's very unaligned, what recourse do we have to kind of, solve that problem and make sure that it's completely what we were originally trying to do against our values, etc. And so personally very interested in the structures that have been mentioned here, both in the legal sense and the kind of terminology sense. I do think we start to get into like boundaries of people starting to think, okay, well, we may be in a theoretical sense call it an exclosure, etc., but people are still going to think you're trying to grab onto something. So there's definitely tension to manage there. So yeah, I guess a couple of questions I'm curious about is one, like what do the kind of processes look like? Like what is actually the thing that is being governed in this sense in the entity, and what are the likely processes that we'll be involved in? Like, are we saying, okay, we're evaluating any use of it and whether they're in or out, or there's legal action, or so I guess I'm curious on that piece. And yeah, also curious how we can not how we can still allow experimentation and innovation. I think everyone has a different piece of the puzzle. I think Regen Tips is a really interesting, innovative experiment in driving certain on-chain activities in Farcaster, in these online communities. They've got a piece of a really interesting puzzle. And the more, different areas of Regens with different knowledge and expertise, I think by working together, we can bring those two bits of knowledges together to create something that's really impactful. And so hopefully this is what this kind of thing can do, rather than dividing and driving people apart and creating kind of hostilities. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add to that. First of all, I love the concept of exclosures, and I talked with Primavera around this idea of WeDear, like how can we commonize ideas and patterns. And I love thinking about Regen as kind of like a label that's kind of just community approved. So instead of, having this rigorous process that's maybe supervised by the government and stuff like that, how can we have this kind of DAO that can just approve? Okay, like this is a Regen product. We can stamp it. We can give it approval. So more thinking of it like you have the regenerative organic label, for example, where you have all these steps and things that you have to comply with. But can we just create something that we can just agree that what is the objective? Regeneration, I assume. So how do we regenerate the planet? What are some baseline primitives that we want to optimize for? And then how can the regen memes and tokens and whatever like just work toward the same objective? And so I think the ecological benefits framework and these kind of actual measuring and reporting solutions could be baked into this kind of stuff. And as long as something kind of follows a general direction and the purpose of where we want to go, then I think, yeah, using basically commercial technology to exclude maybe corporates or people that are maybe not the actors that we want to see in the space. I think that's really interesting.
So with another community that I'm a part of, we've been thinking about the concept of idea machines, which was explained in a article by Nadia something, I can't remember her name, and it talks about how do you create beyond memes, how do you create kind of cultural forces that are actually able to turn memes and funding into action? And that's what I'd like to see really with the Regen trademark and Regen concept is beyond the meme itself. How can we create an idea machine that's actually moving the values of Regen forward? And I think the first part of that is a question of, well, what are the values of the Regen trademark or the Regen concept? What are our values? What's our ideology as a community? And then thinking about how can we actually create an engine that brings in funding, that brings in talent, that brings in people around that meme to actually continuously move this idea forward and actually kind of further the values of the Regen ideology.
And I would like to talk about a concept that maybe you thought about, because I didn't follow the discussion, and maybe it joins a bit that what you shared first. But I would like to talk about in historical terms when we look at what Aborigines or first world cultures were basing their commons towards, because they were taking care of the land and all the assets they had together. And those cultures, they were not owning those commons even together. They were just stewards, they were guardians, and they were guarding not just a piece of inanimate land or trees or forest or animals. They were communicating with a spirit. There was a spirit for every piece of land, every forest, every stone had an entity that they were communicating to. And so in the idea that we are now trying to gather back the commons, means to protect them, to bring them back in a spirit of stewarding what we all share. I'm wondering if it would be interesting, no, not if it would be interesting, because I know from experience that when you bring life to a thing, you give it power. And the idea we are trying to bring here to take care of the commons is not a thing that we can own by doing a new meme on it. I feel like we need to give it life. We need to give it an existence by, I don't know how legally or I don't know through which a process it can be, but it would be about giving spirit to the different commons, giving life to the different commons by giving them an entity, a legal entity, a presence entity, a name that can be itself as a being that we would steward for the further generations, not just a thing, but a beingness there that we pass on, we just take care of. But it's like the idea of giving it an identity, a thing that we can refer to, communicate with, not just a meme, or I don't know if I'm clear enough, but that's the... At least I feel like he would bring back the power that the ancestors were having in taking care of their own commons. Thank you.
Just in response to that, one set of ideas and patterns that I wanted to reference is in relation to ecological institutions or institutional ecologies playing in the same area as thinking about this notion of legibility into different systems. So whether that's legibility into our nervous system, our psycho-spiritual system, our legal system, our technical system, our economic system, political system. These versions of legibility have been mapped out in a couple of beautiful articles by Austin Wade Smith, the executive director of Regen Foundation, really cogently unfolded this idea of ecological entities. And I think the piece that you really bring back, I think, is absolutely what needs to be at the heart of it. The spirit, the chi, the samai. We were told to, follow the water, follow this flow. And I think part of the dynamic with the commons is that you, and especially a smart commons of the kind that we're all collectively imagining, is that it's a transparent set of flows that we can all see together. And that's what tilts the odds in our favor this time, right? That's sort of like the latter ostrum as applies towards these complex adaptive systems, and how in seeing each other commoning, we're more likely to common, like that design of being able to it's a community thing. It's a spiritual thing. I don't know if you guys want to go there. We can let things move.
I mean, there's so much to add and share, and I think a lot of this, a lot of this is, we haven't really presented the work that's happening in Regen Network and Regen Eco-Weaving, and particularly that deep, beautiful exploration of what it looks like to have a rights of nature and even give voice to the greater than human world in specific places and to weave them into network level governance is something that is has active engagement, and there's tons of stuff happening, but it isn't something that gets shelved because there's there's a dynamic here, I think, where you're in, it's like yin and yang, where you're in a subtle process of deeply considering how to express the voice of a place and build governance that represents indigenous and ancestral context that isn't something that you take directly out and spread to the whole world in a simplified way, because you want to maintain the integrity of the process and the exploration that's taking place at a local level. And so I think that speaks directly to the tension that we're proposing we could potentially reconcile through this brand commons idea, right? In which we can start to discuss this, as Monty was talking about, who defines fair use and how is it governed and how is it enforced, such that you can have the coexistence of rapid mimetic infection and engagement and movement building, while also maintaining subtle, beautiful, context-specific, rich, sacred relationships in real places. And that's that's my description. That's how I would describe the bigger conversation that we're all having here and struggling with. And to the degree to which people have instincts around that, I'm super excited to hear and share. So this is very juicy. Thanks for giving just a moment to loop into the conversation. Excited to hear what everyone else is thinking here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gregory. Sean Anderson here. Really happy to be part of the conversation and everything that's happening here in the Commons Hub today. I wanted to come up to the stage and put forward an idea, a way of thinking, in that we need each other. So beyond, rights and whether there's exclusion happening and protecting intellectual property and brands, is just simply we need each other. And I think there's a beautiful pairing between these two emerging ways of interpreting regeneration and how to bring that to the world. Seeing there's a very background in computer science. I see it as like a front end, back end kind of thing. I'm quite familiar with Regen Network and a lot of the work they've done over the years. And I see it as a suite of back end solutions for data management, data schemas, methodology for ecosystem credits, and all the rigorous systems that are needed in the back end to facilitate a process of regeneration. And what we see with Regens Unite is more of a cultural movement, a brand, and an aesthetic that brings people together. And I think those two things are so perfectly paired. So I want to inspire people to think about how we need each other. There was something that was said on the stage got me thinking. There's an example of the fall of the Roman Empire, in which case the church became a space where people would go when they're in need. It became a commons where people could go to survive. The infrastructure of civilization was falling apart, and people found that they could gather in the church to mutualize resources. And so the process of commoning stepped up in a time of need. And in commoning, there's a move away from separation and into collectivism. And that's exactly what we're seeing here throughout the Commons Hub. So just so grateful to be here, and I wanted to put that forward. Thank you.
Who of you are Regen tips?
Is Regen Tips the same as Regens Unite, or is this no? Okay, so I'm pretty new to the scene here, still getting oriented.
But it's beautiful. Yeah, maybe
starting Regions Unite 2 years ago, there was another reason, not only because of feeling that there was this region movement that we wanted to contribute, but there was another reason why we started that, and that is that we felt that when you comment or when you share or when you start creating movements or you follow this urge as a human to sort of recreate and answer to the climate crisis that we are in, we felt that there was a lack of conversation and that a lot of it was about technology, which is great because it actually helps us to communicate with people that are not in the room and that are very much part of this conversation. So it's great. But at the same time, we felt that the human connection or the human relationships and basically the dealing with the human messiness that comes with managing a common, that we do not always have the spaces to talk about it. And I still feel we lack it. And in the process of building up the Regen Village, we ran into these issues. So I got on stage to just point out how beautiful it is that we are having a conversation about the tension that is in the Regen movement, right? In a place called the Regen Village, because we all know each other. It is a village, right? The world is a village. We know each other. It's so easy to connect. Is it really, right? So we're having this conversation in the Regen Village, created by Regions Unite, which is aiming towards bridging polarities. And it's very much about how. It's not so much about the what. The Regen tip is great, but how? How do we have conversations? How do we relate to each other? And the code of conduct downstairs is really an answer to that. We want to have the conversation. Let's talk about it. And that's so different than just, sending somebody out and doing the exclusion, which is necessary at some point. But, also this room is called the Ostrom Conference Room, and the password of this place is Eleanor Ostrom. So it's coming so beautifully together. And I really hope that with Regions Unite and in this place, the stewarding or the that was being talked about earlier, like creating this place comes from us being a human. It's very weird to say, but I felt that was missing, and it's just the drive. It's like the purpose is finding you. It was not me finding a purpose. It was just life that runs through me as a human. I need to create this space. It's just bigger than life. It's just sinking into being a human, creating a place for conversation. So it's so beautifully coming together. So thank you so much for bringing up this conversation. Really cool.
Yep. Yeah. Great session, guys. And so glad that you could join us virtually. It's just so awesome to have all of you guys in with us. Really wish you were here. But I really appreciate the presentation. I think the Purpose Trust is a fantastic vehicle and an excellent candidate for this from a legal point of view. And I don't run a blockchain law journal, so I'm just a guy out there who likes to deal with these kinds of problems. And it's a very similar problem to, as Monty rightfully pointed out, something we've had to grapple with in RefiDAO, right? What if a local node turns toxic, right? How does the network have an immune response to that so that we're protecting the quality space we've invested so much time and energy in creating? And I'm also here wearing a hat of the Commons Hub in Austria, which started in 2021 with the Crypto Commons gathering out there. Shortly before we came over here for one of the Regions Unite events, one of the very first, I believe. It was incredible. And I remember the same conversation Jess was talking about earlier about this. So this is already a dream come true, right? So you guys have already made magic happen. And I'm as inspired, if not more, than I was when I went to the hub out in Austria the first time and experienced commenting as a lived practice, as an embodied principle for the first time in my life. I grew up in America where we've commercialized and alienated ourselves to the nth degree, to put it nicely. And to be in a shared place with other people as peers, right? And to accept the collective responsibility for our collective needs and the requirements for meeting those, and distributing all kinds of work and, being willing to step in and have tough conversations when that's necessary. It's just all an essential part of it. But it's regen and commoning is a vibe, and the vibe is good.
Hey, thank you everyone for bringing these people and this topic together. Yeah, I wanted to talk about something that is really dear to my heart recently, and it's the realization that it's going to be hard to figure out the community level and how we can create commons together. Got cancelled already. Before figuring out the family level. And here I'm not talking about opposing the blood family from the chosen family. I think it's a mix of both. But how do we want to create commons together if we can't have a family together? If we can't have a relationship with a partner? So that's a discussion that I think is sometimes missing because we talk a lot about birthing regenerative projects, but I think that birthing babies is also part of the mission. So yeah.
Regeneration, without generation.
Exactly. Without new generation. So this is one thing I wanted to bring, and the other thing is that I don't know who was on the panel just before and celebrating this collective vision and intention of moving from the story of separation to the story of interbeing and for many years, I was really into this. Like, I spent 6 months in Plum Village that has been founded by Thich Nhat Hanh, who has this beautiful sentence that says, "We are here to awaken from the illusion of separation." And he's also the guy who said, the next Buddha will build community.
Shanga is the concept of the new community.
Yeah.
The guy I don't remember.
And so I almost went on the monastic path with this community, and today I feel that I resonate with a different story. The one that is not opposing separation and non-duality, but it is bringing them together. And that for me, a lot of what I'm trying to do in my life and in my work is how can we dance together between matter and spirit, between separation and non-duality? How can we include them together within maybe a larger vision? And I think this is essential, because if we keep this narrative that, sometimes on Earth we're all at peace together and with all the other species, and peace was there, and then the ego arrived, and then the mess arrived. Like, that's the wrong narrative. Every time the human species arrived on a new territory, they killed the bigger, the most dangerous species. Like, violence, death, sex is part of our nature. And I think learning to embrace these aspects inside of us, in our communities, in our commons, is essential to bring more peace, actually. And I would just want to pay attention to this narrative of moving all together towards non-duality, because I think it invites a level of repression sometimes that can actually destroy our communities.
Yeah, you're basically pitching religio Dao, you know that, right?
I'm not.
No, but basically you're doing, but you are not at the same time. That's the reason why I'm not following that anymore. But you touched something that it has been like really deep for me. That is like the inner regeneration that we really need to achieve if we really want to heal and regenerate this world. And all of that is not only coming from that concept of unity and understanding how can we all be one even from our own individuality, but it's also mainly about embodying that, like convincing not only our mind, but our heart and our emotional body and our spirit that that's where we are. And the big problems of humanity has been come from this dominance of the separation mindset, in which we have built economies that are scarce per se, which is pushing people to to behave in a really competitive and extractive way, because it's a culture full of fear. And dude, it's fucking hard to heal that shit. Like for real. Yeah, now I'm going to share a personal story. 2 years ago, a little bit more, I got in contact with this new Regen, refi, and for me it was like, whoa, this is great. This is like Ethereum in 2016, 2017, like offering a whole new thing. Because for me, I was working in different projects in which people there were saying in their meme or in their cultural manifesto that yes, we are here to care for humanity and to provide a better distribution of resources for everyone else. But in the background, they were keeping the resources for them, and they were putting themselves and their own agenda before the community and before the culture that they were stating. That for me was a really burnout. Like I said, okay, this is all fucked up. And that's when I got in contact with, where is Sam? Thank you, Sam. I love you, Sam. Because I went to the traditional dream factory. I had a 1 weekend experience there, and I realized that there were actually communities building something real. And it was not only real for the land and how we are healing that, but was, personally speaking, was really healing for myself. And I spent, 6 to 8 months back and forward in that community and other communities, and I've been like going really deep into that. And one of the main challenges was that when you're living in a community and you realize that I just need to give to this guy. I have stuff that I mean, these tribes are tribes really different from this crypto jig. We are talking about hippies that they smell bad. But wonderful souls, wonderful human beings, wonderful people that are there fighting for their own vision. And I was there bringing other kind of resources, other kind of values, and connecting with that behavior in which, hey, I can give. I just have excellence in money right now, so I can collaborate here even more, and seeing how not only the community will start rewarding me back, but also I was developing a deeper connection with the nature, deeper connection with the spirits, with the elements. I mean, I have lived magic in this kind of surrendering to the energies of natures and the elements. And it's fucking hard. It's really hard. It's really hard because it's a path that is really full of fears and challenges and a lot of things that will give you go back to scarcity. But probably that is also why I'm so optimistic with religions, because they are also providing tools, right, for healing the own self and for regenerating our own souls.
Thank you. Talking of religions and church, I would love to put the church back in the middle of the village. And we go back to the topic at hand here of this conversation, which was about how do we manage this kind of brand together. But the conversation right now has been a bit about, I was moving a bit toward more like on the values and what it means and the philosophy and stuff, which is a very important conversation to have. And what you say, I think it's beautiful, because to me, it's something that it's so important to make sure that everyone in the refi community and in the Regen community has lived experience. I remember the conversation we've had with Gregory, and he was sharing how he was doing permaculture, where he's in Washington, was it? Well, I forgot now. Where in Oregon, Washington, somewhere in the US. I'm sorry, I forgot. That's beautiful. You just shared the story as well of actually experiencing the traditional dream factory and so on. And so to me, that's really an invitation for all of those people working in the region to have some lived experience wherever they are. And to me, like, the only thing I wanted to say about sharing that kind of brand is that I wonder to what extent isn't this like a distraction? And when I said I want to put the church back in the middle of the village, is like the reality that none of us has figured it out. It's still hard
to do a traditional dream factory. We are still in we are just starting this place like a month ago. Like the Commons Hub in Austria started a few years ago. It's complicated. It's hard. We haven't figured it out. And somehow we want to declare ownership and we want to be the one defining what it means to be Regen. We haven't found a solution, guys. Seriously. So until we do, we need to run as many experiments as possible. We need to stop putting barriers and friction that will prevent or scare people to even try or to dare to use the word. No, go use it. Nobody has figured it out yet. So go use it. Like, I don't imagine if there was like a sustain network or sustainability network, right? And would we have a conversation about can we brand and trademark? And then what? Creating a legal entity. Where? In the US? Seriously? Switzerland? Maybe. But you know what? Like, what on a nation state? Right, so anyway, I like to say that Belgium, we are in Belgium here. Belgium is not a country, it's a concept, right? And don't get me wrong, I love the concept. It's great. Beers are great and wonderful people. One of the most diversity in the world here in Brussels. But anyway, let's not get, I guess my invitation here is that let's keep experimenting. Let's keep trying. And wherever we are, let's have some lived experiences, and from that, something good will emerge. Let's not forget, this is the church in the middle of the village, in my personal opinion.
Thanks for that. I just want to share something that came into my mind regarding memes and how to transmit ideas and culture. So first comes the values. Then, when the values are aligned, we have communities. Afterwards, we have culture. And then, and only then, we have representations of culture. So, the internet is very efficient to represent cultures visually, right? Like, or music, or one or two senses, but not as the most efficient way to transmit culture is human to human, right? So, the more complex is I'm sorry, English is not my first language. The more complex the culture gets, the more options we have to show the culture. Like, there's more options, right? So, and that goes directly to the values. The stronger the values, the stronger the community, and then the culture is way much strong, and then we can transmit ideas with that culture as a core. I just wanted to share that came to my mind, and that maybe that helps.
Nice. I just really wanted to quickly follow up on Xavier's point as well about potential, I don't know, just there's a potential danger of falling into a trap of more bureaucracy. Coordination is also a cost, right? And we already are facing in the Regen movement a lot of costs, like community organizing, as you just said here in the Regen Hub, in refi local nodes. They're not rolling in cash. And then to add another cost burden, now we have to engage in this big political process when exactly what you said, we need innovation, we need this next generation. And look at what Regen Tips has done. I think it's actually pretty incredible. They've brought all of this energy that wasn't previously there, that's starting to circulate. Say, hey, what is this Regen thing? Hey, we're going to crash the Giveth website by causing so many donations. Like, these are really interesting Regen experiments. Hey, it most likely maybe completely crashes and fails or whatever, but what do we take from that? What do we learn in that and bring into new Regen experiments with these new mechanisms? The event earlier here today was all about capital allocation mechanisms and coordination mechanisms. There's a whole book of it. We all need to be experimenting with these different mechanisms. One or two may end up being truly regenerative, and the others all may fail. But if we don't try them, if we don't learn from them, and if we create too many barriers and costs and say we are the core community and you can't, you have to follow our rules, then people are just going to say, I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to go do some other thing. And there's already other exciting shit going on in somewhere else. Like, I'll put my energy into that. So while I value this conversation, I definitely think there's really interesting things going on. This is also a perspective to consider as well, to bring that in. Yeah.
Hi.
a lot of people talked about the church in the middle of the city, and I think that it has been a very beautiful, like, community building aspect through the history. But I'm part of like a decentralized church community in Hong Kong, so we have essentially created like co-living spaces across the different parts of Hong Kong. In terms of, instead of getting people to the building, we have like decentralized out in different districts. So one of the main communities living in something called, like in the center of Hong Kong, is one of the poorest districts. So it's like 15 people that live there together, sharing life. One of the leaders with their 5 kids, and they are essentially taking care about all the drug addicts, the homeless in that kind of district, and like, you know, becoming neighbors and becoming engaged in the community by understanding, you know, not living from afar and like, oh, now we will donate to these people. Now we will create this kind of program to support this kind of people. Instead go and live there and become neighbors, become, you know, my kids, they go to the same school and we start to do life together. Because sometimes I've seen a lot of like programs in different verticals, and you want to structure it, you want to organize it, you put a lot of administrative power in it. But if you flip it around, like if you start to do life and you start to be close to people, then a lot of things happen naturally instead of like needing to be organized by just being like very strategic where you place the nodes of the community you're building. So that's what I wanted to chip in. I think we're the last.
Just a note, we're just going to start to slowly close. So these will be the last 2 folks. I want to give Greg one last chance to respond, and then I will just share very briefly about moving forward, and then we will close the session just to give you an idea. Thanks.
That's great. I was going to speak to something similar. I just wanted to bring into this conversation the concept of place-based regeneration and being rooted in place, and the idea that, well, pretty much the whole world needs regeneration at this point. Like every point of the world, everywhere needs regeneration, and that's a lot of work. So there can never be too many regens. We kind of need everyone to be a regen everywhere. And I know Gregory works with like the sacred headwaters in the Amazon and with farmers across America, and one of my intentions being here in Brussels is to get to know the land and understand what would regeneration mean in this place. It's a fascinating place because it's got such a long history, and the land can really transform over the generations through different ways it's used and different lifestyles of people who inhabit it. I just wanted to bring in that idea of place-based regeneration and also a little piece of culture, maybe a technical component. I think one of the greatest tools for culture building in a commons is dance. And where I'm from the west coast of Canada on Vancouver Island, and we were talking about the church being at the center of the town. And in Victoria, where I'm from, they have an ecstatic dance every Sunday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's like a service, a community service. And it's just such a great place where culture can actually innovate. Like dance is a really good non-verbal way of communicating and sharing. And I look around at this place, I'm really excited for maybe some dances that could be held in here. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I'm really, really grateful that this conversation is happening. For me, having conversations is the biggest commons, and it's crucial. And I mean, I'm gonna take my conclusion for everything I'm gonna say. Gonna say it now. The most important part is to keep talking and to have conversations and to keep talking. And in general, I think we, like in a movement, branding and brands and structures and organizations and words and definitions will have different approaches from different people. And whenever it's like a grassroots and a movement, and like when you look at protests and at different cultural movements, right? They're like, that's very different from corporate organizations, right? And at the same time, if it's something that's meant to be sustainable, then only doing protests and working in a style of activism is maybe also not the thing that's going to solve everything long term, right? So it's always both, and it's like the thing is, for a long time I've not really, and this is all coming from a personal subjective perspective, of course, I've not seen enough community, not enough focus on community and culture in refi, and that has a few different reasons and a few different effects. But I think when we look at the broader Web3 and the broader crypto space, when people talk about, oh yeah, there's like, for instance, today I had a conversation and was about capital, like capital forming and capital allocation. And the person came from DeFi, and it was like, there's no problem with capital forming, there's only problem with capital allocation. I'm like, interesting. So it's just different experiences. And I think what makes things happen in broader crypto and broader Web3 is not external incentive. I think it's culture. And so I think it's very, I think the branding issue is a manifestation, and it's a legal form, and I'm not the best person to ask about that, but I think that's not the critical point. The critical point is culture. And if we come to a point where there's, if it's important to keep a culture going that might be confusing, but that still isn't exuding a conflict and so much drama that other people from the outside don't want to come in. Like that's kind of the risk that I'm conscious about. And it's not only in the word regen, right? Like there were conversations about Greenpill, the movement and the concept and the organization and network, and then the same with refi. There's a DAO and there's tokens and whatever. So I'm just advocating for, let's look at community and culture, and let's look at we need each other, because I've not seen anything like regen tips in terms of actually looking at degen dynamics and bringing it to positive impact. I've not seen that, and it's bringing degens and regens to something, and not degen to regen. It's not about converting. It's not about being a missionary and converting someone to a different church. It's not about you cannot be that, you should be that. It's about and. Look at what's good about one thing, what's good about the other thing, and just bring that together.
So yeah, I just wanted to give a chance to Greg for if you have a final response, and then we'll be closing out the session.
There's a lot of rich thoughts here, and I appreciate getting to hear. I think and I left this slide out where I said this, but I'm sort of too late. But from my perspective, the framing that I'm coming to this from, and I think that generally there's like a large, like I'm speaking at the moment, I believe, as a representative of quite a big subsection of the social graph that all of you are part of. So it's not just, I'm trying to distill something that I think is a common sentiment amongst a big group or sort of like coalition of regens, which is that at this stage, in order to serve both capital formation and capital allocation, and in order to build a healthy culture at the base of a movement, we want to use existing tools, legal structures, software tools, in order to create a higher level of coordination, organization, and cooperation amongst, like, while preserving initiative and innovation, and that's a hard thing to do, but that's the intention. And there's a few concrete next steps which have to do with creating a process whereby a community of actors, instead of a single actor, defines fair use around the Regen brand in the specific applications that we have the ability to create either an exclosure or enclosure. So this isn't an infinite conversation. There's sort of very specific, sort of like a very specific realm. Just like you, like on Ethereum, if you have an .eth address, no one else can have simultaneously that .eth address, but you could make a DAO out of that .eth address, which, by the way, we have regen.eth, and we'll be using that as one of the tools here. Thank you to Todd for providing that. In the same way, we have this trademark, right? And ideally, there's other tools and other things that people start to bring and say, this is an example of something that we could create harmonizing and coordinating interactions in order to serve the next steps that everyone is alluding to or speaking towards, right? So there's some specific, very concrete things that we are commenting, that we're putting into that are practical. And there can be side conversations about, is a .eth address or a trademark like good or bad, and do we care about trademark law or other things? But I don't think that's the nature or like really the invitation in the next step. The next step, I think, is we have these concrete things. How can we use them to increase capital allocation and capital formation, coordination, and culture building, right? In a concrete and innovative way. And so I would love to invite anyone who feels passionate about that to just directly engage. And we're going to be moving forward, and we're going to be incorporating Aduna around this, and we're going to be moving something from a private company into an on-chain community governance, and it'll be multiple things. As I mentioned, there'll be on-chain addresses, there'll be trademarks, there'll probably be tokens, there'll be other things which we want to experiment with commenting as a process of learning in public and trying to make the next phase shift towards embodying our values and creating regeneration from the local to the global.
I'm hearing an invitation to a potluck, that the table is set, and what would you like to bring? Thank you, Todd, for .eth, and Greg for the whole trademark. What else can we bring to the circle to have more for all? Tony, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to end with the last couple of stanzas of one of my favorite authors, translating one of my all-time favorite philosophers, Lao Tzu. The things of this world exist. They are. You can't refuse them. To bear and not to own. To act and not lay claim. To do the work and let it go. For just letting it go is what makes it stay. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, everyone, kindly for your very highly valuable attention and deep listening. I think this has been very fruitful. And yeah, just I'm sure through our coordinated networks, you'll hear about opportunities to participate. And thank you so much for your presence.
Thank you.